Hey everyone and welcome back to the channel. As you might have guessed, this tutorial will be about Arnold Toon shader, which is a fairly new shader, and at first it is very advanced, lots of controls, lots of sliders in there, and I will just want to try to explain you most of the most used parameters and how to use them to get a more or less good looking image. I won't be using any diffuse textures for now, it will be just procedural, but you will quite quickly see the benefits of this shader. And before we jump into this tutorial, make sure to follow me on Instagram to always be up to date with the latest stuff I'm working on. And you can see there's already the tutorial published online, or at least a screenshot of what we will be doing today a few days ahead. So you can always be up to date what I'm doing right here. And obviously the same goes on my Twitter account, where I'll be posting lots of channel infos and tutorials. So let's jump into this video, and you will see that I will be creating this low poly look of a car, and it is defined by a light. It has a light direction, like coming from the top left defines how the color on the car is. And then on the shadow side, it will have a different color based on the light angle. And then I also have a different guy, a person actually. Oh well, we also have the edges. So these two combined, these are two AUVs which are output by the toon shader, which is the edges and the beauty. And combined, the combined version doesn't look as nice because it doesn't use a proper alpha channel. But if you comp them together, you can just multiply the edges on top of the beauty and you get an awesome result. And then I have the guy, which is coming up right now, which is this guy. So I will be showing you how to get these nice contour edges. This is a bit more advanced because I'm using 3 different types of a mask ramp to drive. At the bottom you see this weird flake pattern. Then you get these lines, and at the top you get these dots. But I'll be showing you how to create that. And for the beauty, you can see that there's like a little rim light. You can see the contours happening right here, and all the stuff I will explain to you in detail. And you can see this is the shader. It has lots of options, and by all means, I'm not even really familiar with this thing. There are lots of different scenarios which you can create, and you can just see the library created, which is on the Arnold docs. You can create very interesting shaders with this stuff. This is now using, I guess, just the contour edges and a little spec shader on top, so you can see, or it might be the highlight shader or something. And it works in combination with the default shaders as well. And a few limitations: it doesn't work with volumes, no motion blur, no depth of field, and no VR camera. But based on that, I think you can still create lots of good images, and I will be showing you how to set this stuff up. And also I will be providing the scene files, so the Maya file with these 2 models. So you will get this head guy and the Mazda low poly car, which is here, and I will be providing them on my Patreon channel, so be sure to be a patron on there, and you can get instant access to the source files and follow along, or just get the models to work with. So let's jump into this. So I'm just opening my viewport, and I just want to delete the lights and delete, what else do we need to delete? Oh, and just for now, just assign a base shader, the standard surface shader, right? So this is my model. I just save the scene as tutorial toon shader dot tutorial. There we go. And now let's just hit render. And go to beauty, and because we don't have any lights in the scene, this is what we currently get. So let's first go to viewport and let's just create another, like for the toon shader, it's better to use directional lights to get these harsh lines. Obviously you can use also a sky dome to get softer fall offs, but I just like to use that. So it's up to you what you want to create, but I will be showing you this with a directional light. And I have selection highlighting turn off. That's why it might look confusing, but this is now back on, and let's render this guy. So this is what it looks like right now. And in the render settings, I currently have contour shading on in my filter. On default, this is on Gaussian on 2. And then I also have a ground plane, which is here. And this one has a simple shadow matte shader, which will give you, or which will give some speck highlights and some shadow catching. And then I changed in my render viewer, I changed the background color from black to like a grayish color. And then this is all I did for now. So it looks nice and integrated. And it's using the background shader. So this would be a black shadow. I just had it a bit more lighter so you can actually see a bit. And that is my setup. And so let's jump right into the shader. And I will be heading over to the viewport and assign a new shader. I've got a favorite. It's not in my favorites yet. So Arnold shader and then a toon shader assigned. And on default, it has a base color. It has no spec. And I think edge is on, but it requires the contour, which is currently off, so it won't render the edge stuff. Silhouette is off, and the silhouette is just an outline of the thing. Base colors are 0.8 white, no tone map. Then we have a stylized highlight, rim lighting, which is off, transmission off, emission off, no bump connected. So most of the things are turned off on default. So if I render now, heading over to the render view and update full scene, run IPR. So this is now running and you can see what we get. The only thing is I have 2 AOVs. I just created custom AOVs with the light path expression to show me, or for a beauty shader. And then I just changed the mode to Gaussian as a fixed one for the beauty, and then this one, the bigger than bracket, means it's taking what is currently set in the render globals, but this should actually be contour like this, and then we should be set up. So now the edges is rendering contour shader, which is this on default, and then we've got the beauty from the toon shader. So if I would it looks toony already because it's a low poly model, so keep that in mind. And maybe just for reference, what I will do, I will just create a round sphere so you can see how it would look on a smoother surface like this. And I will add subdivisions, 1 subdivision, and I will assign toon shader 3, toon 3, hit save, and this is now what we get with the toon shader assigned. Okay, so they both behave properly. So currently no base, so it's both black. We just have the shadow from the shadow matte, right? So I think the first thing what we want to do is explore the contour shader. So we head over to edge, and for this to work we need to enable contour, right? So we can either do it in the globals, or we can just head over to the edges thingy, which is kind of the same effect, but to illustrate, let's just change it in the render globals to contour, sorry. And then head over to the beauty. And this is now what the beauty looks like. It's both the same, as you can see. All right, so currently we just see the outline, which is the default because it's based on ID difference, and because the car is 1 ID, you get this contour for this. So then you can see you have the angle threshold, and this is kind of like based on the normal map, or on the normals, it will create edges. So whenever it detects a color difference, it will create an edge. So if I would do maybe 20 degrees, you can see that it always takes a while to compute, but this is because it only generates the contour on the last final step. So what I tend to do is I disable progressive refinement, and I can be sure that it's always updating immediately. So the smaller you make the angle threshold, the more edges it will find. So let's go 5 degrees. And you can see we get more edges. And because the sphere is so smooth, I think we need to go a lot smaller for the sphere. Let's try 1. And now you can see something is going on the sphere, and you can see these facets of the pulleys. So this would be an angle threshold of 1. Let's just change it to 2. And you can see we've got pretty thick lines, and you can control the max width in the render global. So if I have the width on 1 here, it won't get thicker than that. But I like 1 because it's a nice pencil line, which is cool. And then you have options to get a silhouette, which is on default on if you have just a few objects. All right, so what you can do now is you can create additional edges to this. So to do that, you would use a mask color. And what it's like, how the edge detection works, it's based on color differences. So I could plug in any sort of noise pattern, and it will, based on that, generate edges. So we can just use a default texture. Let's just use AI noise and see if it produces. You can see we get definitely some patterns right here. So if I change the scale to maybe 2.2, it should get larger like this, and you can see we get different patterns now just based on what the input is, right? So what I like to do is create maybe some fractal breakup like we did before, right? So to do so, what I did, or what you can do is just connect a flake shader, for instance, which would help you create these little flakes. So under I think shader, is it here? Utility. Oh, there's so many different options. AI flakes. So I just plugged that in, and you can see it definitely shows the flakes already, also on the sphere on the top here. So let's just try to do world space. Oh, yeah, because then these two are the same. And now let's increase the scale maybe to 1. And now we should get larger flakes, which is the case. Awesome. And then the density to 1, so it's fully filled out with flakes. And this is how you would get a flake shader on top of the edges as well, which is an interesting effect. It might not be really like a toon shader, but you can see you can get these nice illustrative drawings just based on this simple thing here. And then we can do these the base color, for instance, and we can set this up using a tone map as well. So a tone map is based on a light angle. So to do so, let's just introduce base color and head over. Either we can just stay here, or we can just move over to the beauty instead, which is this guy. And if we plug in a ramp in the tone map, we get this effect immediately. So let's see if it's actually working. If we can see a difference here, let's just try none for now. Just moving this guy over. It's a bit slow because I'm running full res. Maybe I should just change resolution a bit to be 50%, so we have more speed on our end here. Okay, so now it's on 50%. So let's just see if we can actually see a difference here happening. So we definitely see a difference there. So if I just bring this one a bit closer, at some point we should see it's switching over. So this is now, just because the key light or my main light is coming from the top, this is what you get. So if I would do a more sidelit light, something like this should look way more different. You can see now this is fully white on this edge, and you can see it's working on the sphere as well. So this is interesting. So let's work with that. So if I head over to the tone map, you can see that the shadow side is gray, right? So whatever's on the left is on the shadow side. So let's just move this guy over and just add a few more colors to this whole thing. So let's just try something red. Oh, it didn't confirm. Let's just pause this quickly. Okay, so now we can just set it up. It's a bit faster now. So let's just do red here and maybe something orangey, something cyan, and maybe something blue like that. Didn't confirm again. So let's try this again. Okay, so shadow side is blue, and then it should turn into orange, and then let's just do yellow, and then maybe white, or just really hot, something like this. Okay, so let's enable the render again and see what we get. So you can see on the sphere, you can see the nice gradient happening, and you can kind of see the effect on the car. Currently the interpolation is none, so you get these steppy edges, right? Which is a toon shader effect for sure, but you can also soften them out if you just add interpolation to be linear, and you can see now on the sphere the smooth fall off on this, and you can definitely just play around, make this even larger, and play around with these fall off curves to get an interesting result. Let's just try this again, move this guy over. And now let's see, okay, so this would be the toon shader based on light direction. So if I would tear off a copy of my viewport and drag in my directional light, I'm not controlling the light. So if I zoom in on the car like this, I can just rotate my light angle and still render from this camera. So now we should see, if I enable progressive, you can quickly see that the light angle changes the contour shader, the toon shader, and you can definitely see it very clearly on the sphere. So I kind of, let's say I kind of like this, maybe a bit some nice colors here, and this is pretty cool. You can see still the shadow from the sphere on the car. Let's just move this over, and this would be my toon shader for the beauty pass. And then you have the edges, which are like these currently, and this is now currently my beauty, because I can show you the problem is the edges alpha channel on the contour mode is just like this, and combined it just does not really add them up. So this is why there's like this weird look, and this is all just because I have a gray background. So if this would be black, you should be fine to do that, and we can leave it on black. I just thought it's easier to see what's going on if it's like a little grayish. So let's change it back to 100% just to get nicer lines, and progressive off, and this is what we get. So this would be the toon shader with those line patterns right on top. Let's just close this guy. Let's see what else is in the shader, which I can talk about. So you can have different things in the mask to generate edges, which is nice. You can have separate control of opacity. You can have a different tone map, which is for the edge itself. You can have different colors in there. And please, if you don't understand all these options, They are all documented right here. There's lots of information. Read through them, and it's very informative. So I'll be just brushing up on the basics, I guess. So I will be heading over to the head now. Let's just do that, and view panes and head, frame this guy. So this is the default render, the default head for most of my skin renders. And I think I will just assign a toon shader right now, aiToon, and frame this guy and render this. Okay, so this is what he looks like with the same lighting for the car, which is okay. It's the top-down light, and currently we don't have tone maps on it, so it's pretty standard. Okay, so heading over to the toon shader, what I like to do first is create this rim light and maybe a silhouette or something. So I'm just disabling the edge, which so we don't, it does not try to detect edges. And so let's create the rim light. So, and for that, just disable the base. And let's change this to progressive on. And I will be creating a new light, which will be the rim light. So create lights, directional light, drag this in here, frame on the head. Not sure why this never really works so good. Anyways, I'm not sure. Sometimes it's just buggy, these lights. Where is it now? There. Okay, I'm just snapping it on the surface now. Okay, so a rim light is mostly from the back. So what I'll be trying to do now is if I hit lights, I think we can control it. And is there a way to just have single lights? Use all lights, use selected lights. Okay, so if I look through the camera, just here, I can just do this kind of thing, which is the rim light. So I kind of have the light direction. And let's just disable lighting again. Lighting, use default lighting. So how the shader works, it needs a path to the rim light. So in the rim lighting, you get this light slot, and what you can do, just middle mouse drag the directional light on here, and it will populate the path for you. And this is more or less all you gotta do. And you would also need to provide a color, but for now, let's just render this. Should be no much different, and you can actually hide the light if you don't want it to affect the diffuse, right, or the base color. So I'm just hiding this and heading back over to the head. I will be adding a color for the rim light. So a default color is not really that helpful because it will tint it uniformly. But what I will be doing now is creating a ramp, connecting a ramp to that. And then it's kind of the same thing as before. You would need to specify the fall off based on the ramp. So for now, just disable the ramp, and you can see now what we get. So the more to the right, the more we come to the edge, and we get the nice rimmy effect. So if I would change it to linear and move this guy over, you can see that we get this nice rimlet effect. With a fall off, if you want to go in that direction, you can easily just do that. And obviously you can add colors. So let's say I have a cyan color there, and then we get something more warmer like this. And this would be now, well, it looks almost like iridescence, but let's just keep it simple and just put the blue to the really to the far edge, and then just do that. And this would be now my really soft rim light. And you can still control it in the shader a bit more. So you can actually change the width of it a bit here. So you can just control it more easily there. And let's go to the base. So the base is our base shader. It's currently black, so it doesn't have any diffuse. But if you have a texture, you can just pipe in the texture here and you get a nice look there for sure. You can do that. So this is now my base enabled, and I can just have a base color, something like this. But I can also just add a tone map because this is now really soft shaded. And if you use a tone map, you can get the nice toon look. So just change the mode to none again. So we get these harsh edges. And then you can already see what's going on here. So everything which is white will get the base color, right? Which is this color there. And the black is the shadows. So I could now just create the same color and it should be pretty, oh, I think I actually get multiplied these colors to get a shadow. So this would be now a interesting shader because it's top lit and you can see what's going on because we get the shadow there. So you can now have different intensities of this, and you can very easily just create this imitation of a shadow line or something getting darker, right? And this would be a toon shader with a rim light. Currently we don't have any edges. What else can we do? We can use specularity to create more interesting patterns. Like, let's see if I bring up the roughness a bit. We can see that you get something here, and you can also use that for edge detection as well. But you can also tone map this. I think I haven't tried this myself yet, but we can just see what this will bring us. So if I put this to none, you can see now that we get these reflection lines, which are pretty interesting actually. And I think this is the base color as well. So if I go back, whatever is in here would be my pure reflection, which is now just added on top. Oh, because the weight is so low, you can see what's happening. And I think it has indirect as well, indirect spec. So if this would be off, I don't think we would see this. There we go. Yeah, so, but I think white is a better spec color. Maybe not as intense, so maybe 0.2 would be working better. And because it's energy conserving, the whole thing changes. So if a thing is fully specular, it won't have any base color. So this is what energy conserving is, right? Okay, so what else can we do with this guy? So I think we should jump over to the edges. So if I enable edge, we currently don't see any edges because I don't think, oh, maybe contour is actually on. I'm not so sure if it's on. It is still on. Okay. So it's not detecting any edges because the angle threshold might be too high. So maybe let's go down to 20 and see if we get any edges. So we can see there's something appearing on the eyes. The problem is because again, it only displays on the last step. It will take a while to display. So I'm just disabling the progressive refinement. And I'm just rendering the head for now. So let's just try an angle maybe of 3 and see what we get. And now you can see we get definitely some patterns here. What we should do now is, I guess, because it's such a high dense geometry, we can use a different wireframe. So let's just try to use a mask color instead. And for this, let's just use utility shader, which comes with Arnold. Which is AI utility, and the default mode looks a bit strange, but you've got different modes in here. So let's just use flat, and then we will use some color modes. So what you can do here is you can actually use polygon wireframe, and you should get a contour shader based on that, right? So this is actually interesting because it has a thickness to it. And then you have different modes. Like a float grid is pretty interesting. It's creating like a XY coordinate on the geometry. So you can definitely play around with this stuff. You can see you get these nice patterns there. What else can we do? We can use reflection lines, which are interesting. Let's see if this works. So yeah, there's all these fancy things you can do, and I'm pretty sure you can get a pretty interesting results just using these kind of things. What else did I want to show is you can try to, what was it? Oh yeah, what I did as well was connecting a ramp in here. And then in the ramp, you can do several things as well. So you can actually blend different modes together. So that's also interesting. So if you would use a ramp, you can actually pretty simple just plug in a different mode. Let's say for the bottom, we just plug in here. I'm just pausing the render for now. So in the bottom, you can, for instance, use the flakes, which I did before. So let's try to find them. AI flakes at the bottom. Let's go back and put something in here and here. And then the last one, maybe a checkerboard. Haven't tried that. We'll see what that brings us. So let's just start rendering again. So now you can see at the top we get the checkerboard, and at the bottom we get the flakes, and it's all driven by the ramp, right? So if I just, oops, I just want to frame this a bit nicer, like this, and head back over here, and maybe just for now, just to 50%, so we get faster feedback. Oops. I hate when this is on. Okay. All right, so this is now what it's currently looking like, but it's not perfect because you can see it's way too dense at the bottom. So let's just adjust these things a bit. So the scale is too small, so maybe just try 1.5 for the flakes at the bottom, and you see what we get. This looks pretty interesting, especially with these edges inside of that. And then you can play around with the density, maybe try 0.8 to get a bit more, and try the randomize. So these are things you can just play around with to get interesting results. And for the top, you can see the checkerboard, which is working also pretty good. You can just change the scale. So you would change the place to Dino, maybe let's try 25. To get something like this, right? And then there's so many things you can play around with. You can also just go back to the noise and add some distortion on top, which should also just break up the whole thing a bit. Let's see if it's actually doing, yeah, so it's, you can see that we get flakes on the top now, and we get these nice little lines everywhere. So it's definitely something to play around with, and there's so many possibilities, especially if you also blend in textures. It can get very interesting. So this is almost like the Spider-Man netting on his face or something. And again, it's split up in beauty and edges. So the edges are, because it's like this, it's just an alpha map. One cool thing which I want to show you before I finish off this video, you can actually use this to blend different modes together. And what I mean by that is you can actually use occlusion to bake occlusion on top. So what I did before is I can just create an occlusion node. That's the one, and delete this guy. And before we go into the shading engine, we just create an AI multiply node, which just multiplies two outputs together. So this and this, and we connect them to the surface shader. And heading over here, we should see that we get some occlusion. You can see it's getting dark at the bottom, and in the eyes you can see more shadowing happening. So let's try a size of 30, so it's not occluding everything, it's only around the eyes. And you can see the difference if I would change to disable it quickly. You can see that the bottom is getting a lot darker and around the eyes and ears. So back to 30, you can definitely see a difference there. And you can do the same thing with all the other nodes as well. So if you want to see slightly a wireframe on top, you can just create an AI utility node and multiply this one on top as well. So just AI multiply, connect these guys up like this, change the utility mode to be flat, and let's try overlay mode polywire and see what we get. And you can see it's just multiplied on top. And obviously if you want to change the control or the intensity of the wireframe, it's easy to do. It's just create an AI range node, connect it in between the wireframe and the output, and change the out min to maybe 0.5. And now we should see a lighter wireframe being on top of there. So we can go even further to something like this. And this should summarize or sum up most of the things you can do with aiToon. Obviously, if you check the documentation, there are a lot of different images which should inspire you to do interesting things. And obviously read through the documentation to get more detailed information about these things. But I just wanted to give you a quick jump start on how to set things up, especially using edge detect and the contour render filter. Yeah, so thank you guys for tuning in, and be sure to check out my other social media sites and hook me up there. And also, again, the source files for this, the whole scene, I will save this guy now, and whatever this scene file will be uploaded to my Patreon site, where you will have full access to the scene file and the render outputs. So thank you guys for tuning in, and enjoy your weekend, and happy rendering.